Strengthen the PMO. And I mean, you follow the dollars and the message is there. And, where is that? And I have that sense today that even, that your party is reluctant to move too far in pressing for reforms, because in the back of their heads, they're thinking, one day there's going to be a miracle and we're going to be back in power. And, why, I know it's going to have to be quite a miracle, but, they...
No, it's called an election, actually.
Well, that would be a miracle. Yeah.
That's all it'll take.
Just, it's like a controlled miracle.
No, but I mean, I would only say fair enough. I mean, I think that. Again, I don't think I'm here to give a partisan pitch. I mean, I do think that we take quite seriously this problem of the corrosion. I think question of how far you go, what you do. But for example, limiting the power to prorogue. I mean, Michael's made that very clear. He wants to do that. He's committed to doing that. And sure, there are people who say, well, don't go too far. But I mean, I feel very strongly that the political system is not working very well, and the proof that it's not working very well, the simple proof it's not working very well, is that more and more people are turned off by it, and they're turned off by it enough that they're not voting.
Right.
And at some point, you sort of say, what are we going to do about this? This is a problem, and there are a variety of things we can think about trying to do to encourage more participation and more voting. Maybe it's more proportional representation. Maybe it's, there's a variety of things we have to think about. But we have to be prepared to really think hard about how do we actually help this to happen? Because it's not in anybody's interest. I mean, it really is something where all political parties have to say, it's not in anybody's interest to have this low number of people participating. Don't forget, people forget this, in the Charlottetown referendum, in this province, we had 92% participation. So don't tell me that people don't care about democracy. People care. They were ready to go. They were ready to get out. And of course, it carried by 8,000 votes in Ontario. It was a very close-run referendum. Of course, it lost in the rest of the country. But the point is, people were engaged. And that is a good thing. That's a good thing when people are engaged to that point and to that level. It's a very good thing.
Yeah. I guess one of the things that worries me, and in a sense, when I was reading your book, I thought, if someone could really, and perhaps this was in the back of your mind, it is kind of I was going to say a short course in democracy, but it's actually a relatively compact book, but the sweep of it is quite extraordinary. And, I think that one of the things that we have seen playing out in our domestic democracy is a real lack of knowledge about how the system works. And I think the most astonishing example of that was when the Prime Minister was able to convince 50% of Canadians that only he had a mandate to come out of coming out of the last election. But I mean, how do we get people engaged enough to inform themselves about how they're governed and how they can affect that government?
Well, I mean, we all know what
they can buy the book, right? Which
no. I mean, no, they can do that. But
no, the book is worth it.
They're going to do that anyway. It sells itself. I think there was an exciting moment. Whatever you think about the coalition idea and all that happened after that really stupid economic statement by Mr. Flaherty, which created this sort of sense of, well, if that doesn't work, then we're going to have to do something very different. If that's their approach to minority government, then we're going to have to change the way this all works. And I think that was an exciting moment. I mean, it evaporated eventually, but the fact is, you can do politics differently. You can create alternatives. There is, within our system, it's a very simple fact. I mean, Parliament ultimately decides who the Prime Minister is. The Prime Minister is the person who can gain the confidence of the House of Commons. End of story. That's all it is. How that happens, I mean, what are the combinations that make it happen, is frankly, how the process operates.
But there has to be a public endorsement of that too, and there was a real doubt in the country that was actually...
That's true, and that's why I think eventually I think that's why people pulled away from it as something that, well, maybe that's a stretch too far. But on the other hand, when we did the Accord in Ontario in 1985, it proved to be, it was very popular. I mean, it was extremely well received in the public, much better than I think a lot of established, opinion reporters and others said, well, what is this really? And you say, well, actually, it was well received. So, I think there's all sorts of possibilities. You just have to be open to the possibilities. The point, I guess, that I'm trying to draw in the book about all of that is really quite simple, and that is that we have come through a whole series of challenges and problems and our own set of violence, our own set of dynamics in our own cultures to create this thing called democracy. And it has its own problems now in our country and in the West. What we're seeing around the world is kind of similar but different. And we've got to avoid the tendency to say, we've got the perfect constitution for you. Just, it's at 1D on the shelf there. Just pull it off and it'll work for you. I can remember a time when I was in Iraq for 3 weeks in the summer of 2005, advising the UN constitutional group, which was sort of a little task force of people who were talking to the National Assembly of Iraq. And there was an American, a diplomat, who was talking to us. And he expressed real impatience. He says, how the hell, how long does it take to get one of these, constitutions done? He said, how complicated can it be? And, like it's, you got rule of law, you got 1 chamber, 2 chambers, judges, what else is there? And I looked at him and I said, sir, between 1775 and 1781, you had a pitched battle with the British. Between 1781 and 1787, you picked one model that didn't work, and then you picked another model. And then you had another 7 years before you got the Bill of Rights. And then you had 70 years of intense conflict about the most basic issue as to whether you could have slaves or not. And then you had the Civil War, in which more people died than had died in any civil conflict up until that time, anywhere in the world. And you're telling these people that this is easy? Like, who the hell are you kidding? Like, what are you talking about? And I think it's because, and this is one of the themes of the book, is everything happens in time. Everything happens in history. And in the back of the book I pay, people think it's kind of corny, but actually I pay tribute to my history teachers because I had some very sort of important history teachers in my life in school. And it really developed, it's still a kind of fantastic taste that I have for history. And we have to understand everything happens in time. And if you don't have that sense, then you're never going to get it right. If you don't understand that the Iraqi conflict has parallels with the previous Iraqi conflict, and if you don't understand what the difference is between Sunni and Shia, where does this difference come from, and you don't kind of get at all these things, you can't understand it. And so a lot of what we've kind of done in the governance business, and there is a kind of a business, sort of a constitutional business around the world where people come in and say, well, do this and do that. Unless you really kind of say, look, we're here to listen. When somebody said to me, what do you do? And I go to Nepal. I was in Kenya last year for 3 sessions. And then this year I've been in Nepal twice. I'm going back to Nepal, I hope sometime in the spring if there's no election. And somebody said to me, what do you do? I said, I'm a constitutional psychiatrist. They said, what is that? I said, my job is to listen. You're on the couch there, tell me what it is and what you think. And you say, oh, you think that, eh? Why would you think? All you can do is ask questions and say, well, you can go that route, but if you do, this is likely to happen. We've been through this before. And so you've got to think that through. And sometimes people are offended by your questions. They say, well, we want to make our own mistakes. And you say, fine, go ahead.